Thank you so much for coming out. This is such an extreme honor. Firstly, I would love to thank Creative Mornings, Tucson. I started all with you, I guess that was in 2018, and it was just starting here, and it's just an honor to now be a speaker and be a part of the series and have you all here to discuss truth and a little bit about myself and my businesses. And so again, thank you for waking up and coming on in. So let's start off with truth. When I was given this topic, I had a moment of literally months of just looking at definitions, looking at the philosophy of truth, looking at, as a construct, what truth means, and as a society, how we all operate under this term of truth. And so, of course, as we all do, when you get that one word and topic, we look it up, definition, and I want to read to you exactly what I found. I found 3 definitions of truth. The first was the quality of state of being true. The second was that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. And the third, a fact or belief that is accepted as true. That third one got me. I'll read it one more time. A fact or belief that is accepted as true. Now, in society, we all know that certain truths have been told, and individuals follow certain truths that they have been taught. And so, as a Black woman, when I read this, that shook me, because it had me think of, okay, truth. Is it my point of view of truth? Is it a society's point of view of truth? Is it an overall universal law of truth? What is truth, really? And so I pulled up a few of our synonyms of truth. And as you can see here, they say fact, actuality, accuracy, conviction caught me, and certainty, amongst other synonyms. And still I found myself thinking, okay, in truth, I'm seeing the word fact come up a lot, accuracy, reality come up a lot. But as we all know, and as we all explore these different philosophies, what is reality? What is the construct of reality? Whose reality are we looking through as a point of view? And so again, this one word, these 5 letters, really had this expansive couple of months of me diving in to think of, what are truths? What are my truths? What are my family's truths? What are my friends and colleagues' truths? What are my community members' truths? And with that in mind, I started to break down the different types of truths. And as you can see here, I won't read them all, they break it down in the type of truth, the sensation, and the source. I'll read a few. Intuitive, the sensation, a quiet internal voice, your gut feeling. Source, subconscious. We've all been here where you just get that feeling something isn't right, or something is right, or something might happen, or something might not happen. And so that's a truth. We all hear that saying, follow your gut, follow your first thought, listen to that internal voice. But then I beg you to and ask you, if your internal voice is based in a truth that you've been taught, then how do you react towards that truth? Another one, let's look at scientific. Persistent detection through numerous peer review experiments, data, scientific method. Again, I found myself here as a Black woman knowing history. Whose science? Whose scientific method? What decade is this that we're looking at this through? And just to give you another one here, experiential. Internalized understanding, laboratory of your own life. We encounter this really often with individuals. How you're raised, who you're speaking with, what you've actually experienced in your own life. And if you're basing your truth in your life, then of course that's your point of view. The goal here, I would say, as a society, is that we understand each other's truths, each other's point of view, and take that same value as we have in ourselves. So let me explain a little bit more about myself. I was born in a very small refinery town called Port Arthur, Texas. If you go there, the way we say it is Port Arthur. That's how we say it, Port Arthur, Texas. That's right, Janis Joplin was born in Port Arthur, Texas. If we have any rap people who love rap music, Underground Kings, UGK, was born in Port Arthur, Texas. That's Pimp C and Bun B. Pimp C and Bun B, by the way, this is a side note. They were put on the map by Jay-Z. So if you know that song, Big Pimpin', Spending G's, we were all over the place in Port Arthur because we're like, look at us, we on boats. And not the fishing kind of boats, it's a yacht. And yeah, we were big time when that was going on. That was a song everyone was loving. Let me ask you a quick question, and just shout it out. What do you think the population of Port Arthur is? 80,000, 3,000, 15, 20? It's 55,000. And it's been that way since 1950. So it's a small town, and it remains a small town. Unfortunately, people tend to move either out of the state, or they tend to go to a larger city like Houston, or even a smaller large city like Beaumont, Texas. So that's where I was born, that's where I was from. My family is Creole, so my culture is based in Louisiana. And the food that I love is from Louisiana. We have some supporters, okay. Gumbo, yes, etouffee. And so as I found myself, as a young girl in Port Arthur, this isn't me. This is an image that I found. I was not gonna give you my baby picture. I'll save that for another presentation. But I found myself as a young girl thinking, what do I wanna be? What do I wanna be when I grow up? Do I wanna stay here? And honestly, what I found as a young girl in Port Arthur is that people tended to either leave or really ground themselves there. And by grounding themselves there, they tended to wanna stay, build a family immediately. Usually the men or women would get jobs at a refinery. Usually you would try to buy some land or buy a house. And so as I started thinking of this, and I'm still in elementary and looking around, I just didn't see, the diversity I was looking for at that time, more individuals that looked like me. There is a large population of African Americans in Port Arthur, but also there's a larger population of Asian Americans in Port Arthur. And that's a whole nother immigration story about that port. But I still looked around and was looking for art, looking for culture. And unfortunately, in the town I was born in, they didn't really have much art and culture. It was more about refinery, factory, life, religion, really strong Baptist and Catholic upbringing, and also what do you want to do to try to get more people into this city, to make our city grow. And so I found myself, early on I was in Catholic school at that time, thinking, wow, is this really where I want to be? Is my family going to stay here? And I soon found out that honestly, they were ready to go too, my mom and dad. They were ready to go to Houston. They saw the same issues. They saw what was happening in our society. They knew the history of Port Arthur when it came to racism, which in Texas, I'm used to aggressive racism. And by aggressive, it's in your face, it's point blank. There's no sugarcoating. There's no passive thoughts about it. They let you know how you feel and when you're not welcome. And so I've had that truth in me and that point of view wherever I go throughout this nation. And so also what you'll find in Port Arthur, again, are these refineries. And with the refineries, this is an example of environmental racism that I later learned. Because as you look at the map of Port Arthur, you'll notice that all of the refineries are around the red-lined areas of that town. And so not only are these individuals living in this town dealing with aggressive racism, point blank, but also environmental racism. And by that, it's their water, it's the pollution in the air. You can smell Port Arthur on your way from Houston. You know you're going into those limits because you'll start to smell this metallic, poisonous chemical smell. And then what's shocking is after 10 minutes of being there, you don't smell it anymore. It's not as strong. It's in you now. What's scary is when you leave, you can smell it on your clothes. So visit Port Arthur when you can. On top of the refinery was also the weather. We're really by close to where Louisiana is, and unfortunately right there in that Gulf, whenever hurricane season comes around, each year it gets stronger and worse. Those who know the history of Katrina, Harvey, they really hit Port Arthur really hard, especially other surrounding cities. And if you go to Port Arthur right now, you'll still see FEMA tents. You'll still see homes that haven't been reconstructed or just abandoned. The city itself is in a really bad space and a really point of view of where they're going in the future. Now, I love my town, but I knew I needed to get out. I knew my truth was I couldn't take on trying to rebuild this town. I needed to look within myself and see what I can rebuild personally and for my family and community. Let's get back to different truths. So, again, in the research, when I was looking at truth and the definition, synonyms, I came across the 4 truths. And with the 4 truths, this is a really interesting concept, is that when you look at subjective, it is how the individual sees and experiences the world. That's a definition. That's subjective, right? And that means, for example, today is a good day for me. A second truth would be normative, is what we as a group agree is true. So as an example, English speakers agreed to use the word day to name what time when the sky is lit in the sky, as an example. Then we have objective truth, is what exists and can be proved in its physicality. The sun moves across the sky each day. Here's the complex. We recognize all of those truths, and we allow ourselves to focus in on one that is useful for that time. Example, the sun is up, the day is bright, today is a good day, so let's take advantage of it and have ice cream. Complex, right? Still using those sort of terminology and definitions when you're thinking of truth, it then brought me back again to point of view. Who am I speaking with? What is their point of view of a similar or same situation? When we find ourselves in arguments with each other or having conflicts, it's usually from different perspectives. So when you find yourselves in these arguments or disconnecting, bring it back to truth, asking questions of each other. What did you hear me say? How did you interpret what I said? Versus, this is what I said. It's like, well, that's not what I heard, and then we're in a fight, you know? So as a people in a society, if we could truly look at point of view and each other's point of view, we can really come to resolution. And so let me get back to a little bit more of my life. I knew when we moved to Houston that I didn't want to stay in Houston either. So here I am, 17 and a half, and I cannot wait to get from out of my mama and daddy's house. And so I go to Sam Houston State University. This is in Huntsville, Texas. And those who know Texas, Huntsville is where they have one of the largest penitentiaries, and where Old Sparky is, and where the lethal injection chair is. And that's where my school was, just a few blocks down. I was more proud about going to SAMU because I was the first in my family to go to college, to go to a university. And so it was all about, thank you. It was all about getting that education and being able to utilize what I learned there. While I was there, I fell in love with theater. And I'm so happy to be in this backdrop of Fox, Tucson. Thank you. You know, the background in theater, having a background of theater. Shout out to Creative Mornings. My passion was stage management. I love logistically how we made the magic happen and hearing those responses from the audience. That was just a high for us. And so as an individual, I found myself in my own truth wanting to be a sort of magician behind the curtain. I wanted to be able to know how all those tricks were happening backstage, but keeping it a secret and hearing the audience react to that. And so passionately, I found myself not only exploring more of stage management, but also seeing myself not in the forefront, but more in the back. And I started to apply that to my life. And even though I wasn't backstage anymore, I tend to still to wear all black, and I tend to still kind of like peek behind corners at events and kind of hide out in the background because of the passion there. So what brought me here to Arizona Theater Company. So it was an honor to be hired by them. I was a young assistant stage manager at the time, and to be able not only to operate here in Tucson, but also this theater operates in Phoenix. So I was getting a little bit of Tucson, a little bit of big city Phoenix, and I was able to really tie in and work with professionals around stage management and theater, but I was also able to excel there. So not only was I learning more about theater and backstage and how the show works, but how it works from the front, how it works from a managing director side, how it works from an artistic director side, and finding out how we go about selecting the season of shows. How do we go about finding those sponsors for that season? How do we fundraise? How do we convince our board members this is a good season for that? And so, again, it was just a well-rounded education, not only to be based in my higher education, but to also work in it. And so my passion was there. My last year at ATC was 2018, and it was 10 years I was there. And they took care of me for so long to be able to learn, to have steady work, and to be able to really start to get into the community and learn more about each other. So shout out to ATC. In 2019, I started Roux events. Now, Roux is from my background being Creole. Anyone who knows what a roux is, that cooks, yes. You know you need a little flour, a little fat, add in some shrimp, some sausage. I'm getting hungry. Make a gumbo or etouffee. And so I tied that into what I was not only learning from my background when it came to theater, but also the events around that. So when you're in theater, especially for 10 years like I was, we were doing a special event with every show. There's an opening night, there's a preview night, there's a closing night, there's a gala every year. And so I wanted to take all of those skills and see how I could reinvest within myself to build up my own business and company and my own ideas. And so with that in mind, I was truly able to start off that year with Black Renaissance. My partner in crime was Sean Louis, for those who know. Our goal with Black Renaissance that very first year, in summer in May, was to do this very thing of diversity and inclusion, to make sure that we are reaching artists that maybe not have been recognized, that we are organizing events that community members want to come out to, that we are utilizing spaces that may not have been used that way before. And we were also able, this is another shot from the other side of my business, Roux Events is based in DEI, so we do consultation. And this was actually a shot, we were over there in the Barrio Viejo, and we were talking about Chinese markets. And so my whole goal was, if we're in these spaces, we should know the history of these spaces and value that before we reconstruct and do anything over it. Know where the land is that you stand. And so with Roux Events in the consultation arm, a lot of my consultation is based in race. That is the very first demographic I use to discuss in, again, from my point of view, to be able to discuss that. And we have courageous conversations about race. And so, again, I want to just lightly go over some of the things I discussed in these consultations, the diverse demographics and intersectionality of all of these things. So again, I focus in on race, but understanding that the intersectionality of race with age and your family status and your sex, all those things overlap. And so when we're having these conversations, we are complex individuals with complex truths. And it's so valuable that in these consultations, when I'm talking with individuals, they understand that, yes, we are a society that has had trespasses with race, but we've also seen that with sex. We've also seen that with your marriage status. I mean, it's only been a few decades before women could even have their own banking account. And those are not very long ago. And so, again, as a society, we know we're excelling, but we must understand that all of these things are complex and they overlap. And so when you're talking and working with individuals, again, see their truths, see their point of views, as well as your own. Black Friday. So, with Black Friday, this came out of 2020. I decided not to leave my house for 2 years. I was inside, and I have a few people who were here that had visited me, that have sent me plants and flowers from a distance, just to make sure I was still I am still in a society, right? There are still people out there. And so during this time, I created Black Friday. And with Black Friday, the goal was really starting to connect Black-owned businesses. Everyone knows what was happening in 2020 and what was happening not only in the screens in front of us, but what was happening here locally. And so when we started Black Friday, I first started with the history of Black business here in America. And it brought me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It brought me to the tragedies that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how many individuals didn't even know of that history of Tulsa. Now, Tulsa's just one city of many that had been devastated, that had pushed Black business owners out, that had made sure that they were too scared to build again. And when you really look into the history of this, you'll look at a lot of those cities being in Louisiana, being around the southern belt. And what really shocked me was like, oh, a flashback to when I was a young girl. That's why I didn't see many Black-owned businesses. That's why I didn't really see us flourish as owners. I saw us as factory workers. I saw us working in grocery stores or working at the gas stop. But it was really hard to find a Black grocery store that was owned by a Black individual, or to find a fashion, anything of culture by Black individuals. And now knowing the history, I know why. So let's go back to 2020 again. I knew I wasn't ready to go outside to necessarily march, so I had to think really hard how I wanted to be a part of this. How can I help this movement? And I looked at our city of Tucson. And unfortunately in Tucson, unlike Atlanta or Houston or LA, we didn't really have a directory of Black-owned businesses. We know demographically we're about 4%, but as business owners, we're about 1.5% for the whole state. And so I figured, well, hey, if I'm gonna do something to really progress this movement, why not start the directory? And so myself, a number of other Black-owned business owners, we started to get the word out to add your listing. And here's the inclusive part. We wanted to break down the gatekeeping. We're not here to make you pay a fee. And if you don't pay a fee, we take down your page. We're here to uplift you. We have 1.5% of us, and we want to find us all. And when we find us all, we want to connect with each other. And that's how we make money, by working with each other, getting the word out. And so we really kind of broke down what had been used before in framework when it came to directories and making sure that you had to pay a fee. It wasn't about the fee. It was about making sure that they could be found. So not only did we do a website, we also did our app. Now, this was a goal and a blessing by the ancestors, because I just sat there in June going, you know what? What if we have an app? And then we can really share it on the move. And we made it happen. So please, when you get a chance, download Black Friday, iOS and Android. Also, with Soul Food Wednesdays, another interactive, making sure you're able to meet owners, many of these owners at our Soul Food Wednesdays events, which we started at Hotel Congress, but now we're at the MSA Annex. Many of them you could only find through their e-commerce. They didn't have a brick and mortar. So many of these businesses didn't really have a face behind it. I also found out that some business owners were afraid to show their face. They didn't want the discrimination of being, oh, it's a Black-owned business, or they're claiming they're a Black-owned business, but I support all businesses, so I don't want, yeah, they didn't want any of that, so they kind of pulled away from that. Again, that broke it down going, wow, how important it is to spotlight who you are. Support each other in each other's complex demographics and intersectionality, and why not uplift these business owners? And so that's what we did. We started in 2020, and we're still going. Every last Wednesday at the Annex, we've had Black-owned business owners come out. We started with 5 or 6 at Hotel Congress. We are now just over 30 with Soul Food Wednesdays. These business owners felt seen. They felt heard. They felt appreciated. Which brings me to what's happening next Saturday. Another plug-in. Soul Food Wednesdays brought out about 30 people here in Tucson. Our Black-owned business festival will now have 65 Black-owned business vendors. We are the largest festival in the state of Arizona with Black-owned businesses. I've talked to my partners in Phoenix. They've done similar markets. They get about 30 to 40 businesses out. With 60, in Tucson, we will be the largest when it occurs. So please come out, please support. And now I'm going to just quickly leave you with a quote from Sojourner Truth. Truth is powerful, and it prevails. Now I'm gonna give you the real quote of Sojourner Truth. P.S. When you look up quotes, keep looking, because some people be cutting quotes off to fit their point of view. So here's the real quote. I feel safe in the midst of my enemies. For the truth is all powerful and will prevail. Sojourner Truth. And again, I just want to leave you all with my contact information. Please do check me out on Instagram at Roux Events LLC and at Blax Friday. My number's on there. Feel free to text me. Let's have conversations. Let's talk about race. Let's talk about intersectionality. And let's be a community. Thank you.